This lecture is on city and town government, also known as municipality government. The state of Arizona has about 90 or 91 cities and towns. They are also known as local municipalities. So when something talks about municipalities, it could be talking about either a city or a town. So how are municipalities structured? Well, the first is they may be called a city or a town. So what is the difference between a city and a town? Well, as many people would surmise, towns tend to be smaller than cities. But that's not always the case. In fact, some states have it such that there really is no difference between a city and a town other than the word city or town. For example, in the state of Arizona, the town of Gilbert is, I believe, the largest so-called town in the country and is one of the largest municipalities in the state. And they will tell you that they don't want to change to the word city because they like the quote-unquote small town feel by leaving the name of Gilbert the town of Gilbert instead of the city of Gilbert. So generally speaking, towns tend to be smaller, but it's not always the case. In addition, cities may be divided into districts from which council members are elected, but I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So how is a municipality set up? Well, generally there are two ways you can set up a municipality. The first way is called the charter way, and that is where a city charter, generally it's a city charter is formed. It's kind of like a constitution, and it outlines the boundaries of the city. It outlines the government structure, for instance, a mayor and council member, whether or not there are going to be districts. That's what the charter outlines. The alternative to a charter is just a general law. In other words, if the residents of a city do not set up a city charter, they will just abide by what is essentially a default structure within state law. It's somewhat analogous to setting up an LLC. In fact, cities are considered corporations, and the charter is sort of the founding document, the incorporating document. Just like you can set up an LLC that is structured however you want to structure it, you can also forego the challenges and the time of actually setting up your own LLC and the parameters that you want, and just default to what exists in state law. There's a default LLC structure in state law. Likewise, there are default city structures in state law. But generally speaking, larger cities will go through the machinations of setting up a city charter. In fact, many city charters existed even before statehood in the case of Arizona. But cities can essentially do it either way, via charter or by law. So how is a city government structured? Well, city government first and foremost will have some kind of legislative entity, usually called a city council. In the case of Arizona, all municipalities have a city council, and generally speaking, they are 7 members large. And one of those 7 members is the mayor. The mayor is elected by the entire city, and then the other 6 members will be council members. In addition to mayor and council members, there is the office of vice mayor. That is chosen from among the other 6 council members in the case of a 7-member city council. So how big can they be? Well, they can be as big as you like. So while in Arizona, generally speaking, there's 7 members large, including the mayor, they can be larger. In fact, Phoenix is an example of a larger city council. It's not surprising given that it's the largest city in the state. But even considering its size, it's relatively small. It's just a mayor and 8 council members as opposed to a mayor and 6 council members. But if you look at Chicago and New York and other states and how they set up their larger cities, oftentimes it's well over 8. In fact, in the case of Chicago and New York, you're looking at something closer to 50 council members. By the same token, you can have smaller councils as tends to be the case with smaller municipalities. The office of mayor or council member tends to be nonpartisan in the state of Arizona. Nonpartisan means that you aren't electing a political party person. In other words, not a Democrat or Republican. You're just electing the person. There is an exception in Arizona. In the city of Tucson, they do have partisan elections, so you are going to be electing a Republican or Democrat in the case of Tucson. And other states can have it set up however they like. They can make it partisan or nonpartisan. In addition, the length of term depends on the city and depends on the state. In the case of Arizona, you can have 2-year terms or 4-year terms for either mayor or council members, and you may or may not limit how many terms they can serve on council. So how does the mayor work? Well, mayors can be what are called strong mayors, where they are essentially acting like governors or little mini presidents, where they wield the power of the executive. They enforce the laws, or the city codes are really what they're called. They are in charge of appointments in addition to administrative duties. They essentially act like the city manager. On the other hand, you can have a weak mayor. A weak mayor might be so weak as to share the executive responsibilities with the council, or the entire council may actually defer all executive responsibilities to a city manager. And there are distinctions there, but in either case, when you're dealing with a weak mayor, usually the office of mayor is more ceremonial than anything else, whereas a strong mayor gets to wield a lot more authority. How are they chosen? Well, there are 2 ways you can choose elected officials. You can choose them in what's called the at-large model. That's where the entire city or town elects the individual. Or you can divide a municipality into a district or ward model. That's essentially where you subdivide it, and each subdivision elects their own. So how does that apply to mayor and council? Well, mayor is elected by the entire city or the entire town. So it is an at-large election process for mayor. Council members, on the other hand, can go either way. You can have the entire city elect members of the council, or you can divide the city into various districts, and each district will elect its own. So let's use an example in Arizona. Larger cities tend to break down their cities into districts. So in the case of Phoenix, Tucson, and Mesa, the 3 largest cities, they are subdivided into districts or wards. In the case of Tucson, it's called a ward. And each district will elect their own council member, whereas the entire city will elect the mayor. So Phoenix is divided into 8 districts, and Mesa is divided into 6 districts. And you can elect the members of excuse me. So you can elect each district can elect their council member, whereas the entire city elects the mayor. In the case of those 3 large cities. On the other hand, you have a city like Chandler. Chandler is the 4th largest city, but they do not do a district model. Instead, all the council members, like the mayor, are elected at large. So when you go to the ballot, you'll see 3 council members that you're electing to the council, and you might have 6 or 7 people running. So there's 3 seats and 6 or 7 people vying for those seats. Whoever finishes in the top 3 will become the 3 council members, and you get to vote for up to 3. If you're in a district setup and you go to the polls, you don't get to vote for more than 1. You get to vote for exactly 1, because whoever wins will represent the district. So that's the difference between the at-large and district models. And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you how the city of Mesa is divided into districts. So here is the city of Mesa. At the time of this recording, Scott Smith is the mayor of Mesa. He is about to step down actually to run for governor of the state of Arizona. But you can see that there are 6 districts in the city of Mesa with the mayor, and they are this is the city of Mesa. In fact, we got to go down just a little bit here so you can see the entire city. So here's how the city of Mesa looks. and you can see that they're subdivided into each area. Now, why are they not all the same size? That's because it's based mostly on population. So over here you have more scattered population, over here you have more dense population. But that's how the city of Mesa is divided in the district model. So what does the city council do? Well, generally they make laws, although they're not called laws. They're generally called codes or city ordinances, essentially local regulations that are like little mini laws. They do have the force of law in the sense that if you break them, you can get in trouble. They also oversee the staff and the departments within the city government. They appoint boards and commissions that oversee various functions, and we'll take a look at those here in a minute. There are non-elected positions that are of great significance in city government. The chief office is the city manager, and then usually there will be deputy or assistant managers underneath the city manager, but they're kind of like little directors of agencies. In addition, citizens in the city can volunteer on commissions, and those commissions make recommendations to the council on various issues. We'll take a look at one on the next slide. But generally speaking, the council or the city manager appoints to these commissions, or in the case of a strong mayor, the mayor will appoint to these positions. And a lot of times these positions are springboards for running for city council, because you get involved more in the community, you get to know people, you network, and as your profile rises, you will begin to be looked at as a potential candidate for city council or for mayor. So what are the commissions? Well, there can be a whole host of commissions, and it entirely depends on the city. But there are some that are pretty common across city governments. And the first and foremost is the zoning commission, or often called planning and zoning. And this is the primary function of the city government. The city government is responsible for determining what types of buildings are going to be built at various places throughout the city. So for instance, an area might be zoned for residential. That means you are going to build homes. Or it might be zoned commercial, and then there's various types of commercial, and that's for building office space. It's the zoning ordinances that will determine whether or not a one-story building or a 10-story building can be built on a particular piece of property, or whether or not it's going to be farming. So if you're ever driving by an empty lot and you see a sign posted there, and it says there's going to be a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to talk about what's going to be built there, you can go and you can see what's being discussed, whether it's an apartment complex or something else. And there usually is an economic development commission as well as a neighborhood commission, obviously looking at the economy and the safety of neighborhoods respectively. But there can be a list of other commissions, like an arts commission or parks and recreation, or it just depends on how the city sets it up. But often there is a commission for all the various, or many of the various areas within city government. And what these commissions do, again, they're volunteers in the community, but they're going to look at an issue. For instance, should an apartment complex be built there on the corner next to the farm that's down the street? They'll make a recommendation to the city council, and the city council may take those recommendations or they may not. It's generally up to them to decide, but they often go with a recommendation of the commission. So here's a sample city government structure. You can see the mayor and the city council are at the top here. Underneath is a city manager, and underneath the city manager are various assistant or deputy city managers for all of the divisions within the city. And often these line up with the various services that the city provides. Again, each city is different, so here's another city, a little bit hard to see, it's kind of small, but see the mayor in the city at the top, and you can see a faint line going upward, and that's because actually above this is really the people. The people choose the mayor and city, so they are the ultimate authority. But underneath them you got the city manager, you have various other functions like the city clerk, the court, the attorney, various offices, managing offices right along here, and then of course the departments of the city. And that concludes city government and municipality government.